What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives of the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 in the Tanto blade. Now, when I got into the knife hobby, when I became a knife enthusiast, the Para 2 was a staple in the industry already, and I just never it never appealed to me. Okay, I'm kind of on record saying that I don't like the aesthetics of Spyderco knives in general. The leaf shape bird kind of thing. It just didn't do it for me. So I never got into the Para 2. I hadn't bought a single one, and I'd seen all the variants. I'd seen, but mostly it dealt with different shapes, not shapes, but you had different color combinations of scale and blade. You had different steels, but it was always the leaf shape that you see here. This is the Knife Joy exclusive, and I'd seen the St. Nick's knives with the red and black, or the DLT with the purple and black and the crew wear, or a lot of special editions, but they always had this blade shape, and they looked like a version of the River's Edge cutlery with the green and tan. And unless I am mistaken, in all of my time being a knife enthusiast and a collector, they'd never come up with a different grind. You had a whole bunch of other options, but they always were variants of this knife. And so when Blade HQ came up with this exclusive, the Tanto version, this is when I decided to give the Para 2 a shot, and I'm really glad I did, because that made me jump into getting this one, and I understand now the appeal of the Para 2. I still don't like the aesthetics of the Para 2, of the regular one, but it kind of opened the door for me to try it out and know what all the fuss was about, because I do think that the Para 2 is just an outstanding knife, an outstanding tool, even if I don't think it's a beautiful tool. So this is the one that caught my eye, and this is the one that got me into the Para 2. And it's because let me give you the tour here, but what you have here is this beautiful Tanto blade with a compound grind. And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm a sucker for a compound grind. But it is really nicely done. You've got this hollow grind right here that turns into a flat grind at the tip. This long, deep swedge in the top right here. So I'm going to try and rotate it slowly so that maybe the light catches all of the different facets of the knife. Let me see. Can you see all of that? So I thought that this was a much more interesting blade than your typical Para 2. Now, let me be very clear. The hardware and the scales are aftermarket. Okay, that's not the way it came. It came with just plain silver colored hardware, and the jade kind of exclusive for Blade HQ. So this one is all of that very unique grind. You have the spider hole. This one is an M4, and I believe they created two versions of this. One was a coated blade, and one was the satin blade. I originally wanted the coated blade, and when I got the satin blade, they ran out of the coated blade. I'm actually really glad that I ended up with the satin blade, because the grind lines on this is just really, really nicely done. I'm actually really glad that I've got this version of the knife. So you have your standard Spyderco pocket clip. You have it's kind of they call it a compression lock, but what it is just a liner lock that is in the back. You have this really ergonomic handle, and that's kind of where what this version of the knife is. So as I said, after this one, I decided to give the regular Para 2 a shot, and that's when it became my size comparison. So But, you know, size comparison, obviously the handle's identical, but although the blade to the tip is the exact same length, when you look at them, this looks like a bigger blade, at least to my eye. That's the comparison to the Para 3. So you can see, obviously, you know, comparing a Para 2 to a Para 2, but the blade shape makes them look like they're different size knives. At least in my eye, when they're closed, they are the same, or they look the same. Let me show you. Here you go. That's the two of them stacked on top of each other. So, you know, it became my size comparison because most everybody has a Para 2 or a bug out, and that's why the bug outs are the next size comparisons. Are the full size bug out. This is the mini bug out, but you can see this is a much bigger knife. It's and while I still consider the full size bug out kind of the edge of the full size knives, it's the really lowest edge of the full size knives, whereas the Para 2 is smack in the middle of a full size knife. So let's jump into the review here. But before I do that, let me just talk. So I'm not a fan of the jade scales that came with it. A lot of people are from the Blade HQ exclusive, but these are titanium carbon fiber scales, and the hardware, the blue hardware, this blue the lanyard hole, it's usually a tube that you can put a lanyard through, but since I'm not putting a lanyard through, they sell something that fills it like that one. So that's the one I got. All of this hardware is from Blades We Love. It's a set that includes everything from the pocket clip screws to this lanyard tube to the hardware. It all comes as a set. So and it's one of the things that, you know, the Para 2 is probably the best knife in the world for customization. I think it's fair to say that. I haven't seen another knife in the planet that you can find more hardware or scales or, you know, or clips or anything like that. I mean, there's entire companies that are just dedicated to creating aftermarket parts for the Para 2 and the Para 3. They are highly customizable, and this is how I customized mine. And if I ever got tired of this build, I could probably go into 1,000 different other builds, you know, from micarta to titanium to carbon fiber to G10 to all kinds of materials, brass, copper, all of that you can do. So that's certainly one of the highlights of a Para 2. But let's talk ergonomics. I think ergonomics are great on this knife. The contouring of the handle that you have here, this forward joil that they have, the thumb ramp, it just tells your hand exactly where to be the most comfortable. There's no hot spots on it. You know, the clip is nice and low, and the ramp at the end, it turns in so that it's not it doesn't poke at your hand. So this is really comfortable in both grip positions. Now, as with all knives that are contoured this way, it's kind of a one-trick pony, right? You hold it like this, you hold it like that, and that's what you can do. You try and hold it in a different way. This one is not bad, but you know, other grips are not as great as the primary grip, which is my preference. I want to look, a knife I think is meant to be held this way, and it should be the most comfortable in that position. So ergonomics on this is really top notch. In my hand in particular, the Manix 2 is just a tad bit better than this, but just by a smidge. I think the only thing that would make this a little bit better, and maybe it's a function of just getting different scales for it, is if the scales were contoured. But the original scales are not contoured. The original scales are flat. So this is kind of true to the original configuration of the knife. But I think if I'm gonna look for some contoured scales and see if and see if that does a little bit better. But it's improving on an already outstanding ergonomic design for the Pair 2, and the reason it's such an outstanding tool is precisely because it's so comfortable in the hand. Because you can use it for a long time without it without getting tired of using it, I guess. Now the action is uniquely Spyderco, right? It if you've tried Spydercos with a compression lock, and most of them feel the same, right? They drop shut, even though they're on phosphor bronze washers, and then deploy with the middle finger flick very reliably. It's very unique. The action is very unique. You can roll them out with your thumb, but most of the time, I mean, the middle finger flick, most people call it the spider flick because of that. So the action, I would call it very good. It's not. I prefer flippers, but you can't argue about the drop shot action. I mean, there's no blade play anywhere, and it's on phosphor bronze, and it just drops, right? And you can deploy it very reliably. So I would call it very, very good. Just not my preferred deployment method, I guess. But for a lot of people, this action is just outstanding. So I would say that the actions, it's definitely in the absolutely pro column. Not the best action I've felt, but definitely very, very good. Now, cutting with this. So this one, when you in comparing it to the original Pair 2, right? I would say that this is a more robust blade. You have a lot more material, because you have full thickness of the blade carrying on through this flat all the way to here, and then you have a far more robust tip because that material carries all the way to about right here. So then you have a much more robust tip. But that affects the sliciness, right? Because even though this is a hollow grind, it gets really thin behind the edge, but you will only be able to take advantage of the thinness of that edge for a very small portion here, probably a quarter of an inch or so. Anything deeper than that, and all of a sudden you're in the full thickness of the blade right here. Very quickly. Okay, so as you're going through cardboard, this one's going to be much better than this one. But for shallow cuts, this one in my opinion cuts a little bit better. For example, if you had a piece of leather laying flat and you wanted to cut through it, especially that point is very utilitarian for draw cuts and for like opening packages and that kind of stuff. The point here, you just grab the knife and just cut straight through, and so they have their uses, but I would say that this one is more of a more robust, harder use, and this one is much better slicer. You've got a more piercing, delicate tip, and this one you have a stronger, more utilitarian tip on this one. It's where the grinds kind of affect their cutting performance. I would say that this is a better slicer. I would say that this is a more robust blade. In fit and finish, so this one is made in Golden, Colorado, USA earth. Man, it just every time I read that, it just makes me smile. I thought that was really cool when they decided to include the earth portion of it. It's really cool. So, but Golden, Colorado, Spyderco is a huge company. They make knives all over the world. They make them in Taiwan. They make them in Japan. They make them in China. They make them in the United States. And I think the United States ones are certainly maybe at the top of the quality control that Spyderco has. The knives are well centered. There's no blade play. The action is impeccable, as you can see. and the fit and finish on these blades, especially this one, the grind, it's just incredibly nice. Most of the Spydercos, because they are, they're your flat ground blades, you don't see a lot of the mastery of production, right? They're flat grinds, and it doesn't quite show off what this one does, right? The sharp line of transition between the flat and the hollow here, and then the sharp transition between the hollow and the tip, and with the swedge, consistent and being perfectly symmetrical on both sides. All of those things it just speaks to it's much harder to do a symmetrical blade when you have all of these things happening on both sides of the blade, because you have to make them, in order for that little tip to look the same on both sides, well, you have to do the bevel, the hollow, and the tip identical on both sides. Otherwise, that little tip and that diagonal occurs at a different angle and in a different location on both sides, and it'd be very noticeable. So the fit and finish on these knives is excellent. Now, the airing of Grievances. Well, I like the blade a lot more on this one than on the traditional Paramilitary 2. I think it has a lot more interesting things going on, even if you sacrifice a little bit of performance in the sliciness area. But you still have this weird looking bird thing, and it's part of the kind of Spyderco ethos. But as long as they do them that way, I'll comment on it. And then I would say that the only other grievance I have with it is just in disassembly. These things are a pain to disassemble. The lanyard tube comes press fitted into here, and you can get a special tool from Sharp Dress Knives and that kind of thing, and try and disassemble it. But man, I mean, there's just no need for that. I mean, put a backspacer on it, put some screws, and get it over with. But trying to tear apart the liner and the scale from the lanyard tube to change scales, and for a knife that is so highly customizable, and most people will want to customize their pair too. Spyderco has to realize that customization is one of the strengths of their knives, and that they have to make it easier for people to do so. Because right now, the stop pin, the pivot is not captive; it rotates on both sides. The same with the scale screws. The lanyard tube over here in the back is press fitted. It's one of the most painful knives to disassemble, especially if you don't have the Sharp Dress Knives special tool to push the lanyard tube through. I mean, there's no need for that. I mean, how many knives have a traditional backspacer and are perfectly successful with it, right? I mean, you just put a backspacer on. You don't need to do this press fitting of the thing in the back. There's no need for that, and you'd be very hard pressed to convince me otherwise. So I think that Spyderco needs to realize that they've got a real advantage, competitive advantage in the customization of their pair 2s and the pair 3s, and they have to make them, well, in a lot of their lineup, the Manix 2 as well. But for people like me that like to put new scales or new hardware on their knives, man, it's just a pain to have to disassemble a knife. So hopefully Spyderco, kind of takes a listen and understands that they'll probably sell more knives if they make them easier to disassemble. If it's your first time disassembling a Spyderco, I would highly recommend that you take one that is on the lower end of price point, or one that you don't like very much, because the forces that you need to take it apart you might end up, bending a liner, or you could damage your knife, and obviously that voids every warranty and all that stuff. So Spyderco, if you can make them easier to disassemble, that would be perfect. Well, guys, the Spyderco Para 2 Tanto review in M4, that was it. Hopefully this helps you out. These are not easy to get. They drop more or less constantly, so you just have to sign up for notifications from Blade HQ, kind of follow them on social media, and go after it whenever they drop. It's not hard to get if you're on the ball when they drop, but they go fast because they're the only, like, you can get the flat grind version in a lot of the, like, if you wanted a black blade, you could get it from Knifejoy or DLT or St. Nick's Knives, or and I think they even have a black version, an S30V version that you can always get. But if you wanted the Tanto version, only Blade HQ. That's the only that's their exclusive. So that's the only place you'll get them, and obviously aftermarket or secondary market, but you'll pay a premium for that. Well, guys, if this helps you out, if you think I earned it, and only if you think I earned it, then like and subscribe, and you know where to find me. Don't hit notifications. Nobody wants to get emails that they don't want. But if you want to see my content, then you know where to find me. And until I see you again, take care.